Imagine a game that lets you fly on a dragon, wrestle bandits to the ground with a suplex, pilot a mech suit, fish by a lakeside, manage a mercenary camp, glide across mountain ranges with a wingsuit, and fight bosses the size of buildings. Now imagine that game also has garbage controls, a story that makes zero sense, PS3 level graphics on a PS5, AI generated artwork hidden in the textures, and a control layout so bad that the developers had to publicly apologize for it within 48 hours of launch. That, ladies and gentlemen, is Crimson Desert, the most ambitious, most chaotic, and most divisive game to come out in 2026. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, we cover big game launches and don't pull punches. Today's topic is Crimson Desert, the brand new open world action game from Pearl Abyss. This thing sold 2 million copies in its first 24 hours, hit nearly 240,000 congruent players on Steam at launch, and then immediately got absolutely roasted in the comments. We're talking about a 66% mixed rating on Steam in the first 12 hours, nearly 5,000 negative reviews in under half a day. I mean, it was so bad, the developer's stock price dropped. The Korean gaming community, the same country the game was made in, was absolutely furious. But here's the thing, this story is way more complicated than Crimson Desert just being a bad game that you shouldn't buy. So let's take it from the very beginning. Before we can talk about Crimson Desert, we need to talk about the company that made it. Pearl Abyss is a South Korean game developer founded back in 2010 by Kim Dae-il and Yoon Jae-min. They are two former developers from Han Game and NHN Gaming. They started with a single idea: build an MMO unlike anything else on the market. That game was Black Desert Online, and it worked. I mean, it worked really well. Black Desert Online, or BDO as fans like to call it, became one of the most visually stunning and mechanically complex MMOs ever made. It's been running for over a decade, and it still has a massive player base today. The combat in Black Desert is legendary. It's the kind of fast and fluid combo-heavy action that makes other MMOs look like turn-based games by comparison. But here's the thing about Black Desert. It's also notorious for its predatory monetization. There are way too many pay-to-win mechanics, there's endless cosmetic cash shops, and some genuinely punishing energy systems. If you've played it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So when Pearl Abyss announced that they were making a new game, a big premium single-player experience, the question on everyone's mind wasn't just, will this game actually be good? It was, can these guys actually do single-player? And more importantly, will they bring all of that MMO baggage with them? Now here's where things got a little interesting, because Crimson Desert has one of the most unusual development stories of any recent major release. The game was originally announced back around 2019 to 2020 as a prequel to Black Desert Online. It was initially marketed as an MMO spin-off. You'd be playing in the same universe as Black Desert, just in a different era. It was going to be a massive multiplayer experience, and then something shifted during the development. Pearl Abyss gradually reimagined the entire project. They looked at what they were building, the story they wanted to tell, the characters they wanted to create, and decided that the constraints of a shared multiplayer world were holding them back. You can't tell a tight, cinematic story about a specific guy with a specific past when there are thousands of other players running around in the same world. So they decided to pivot, and I mean completely. Crimson Desert became a standalone single-player action-adventure game, set in its own separate universe with no connection to Black Desert Online. Same general vibe, similar art style, but a totally different story and world. They also built an entirely new game engine for it, the Black Space Engine, which is an upgraded version of the engine that powered Black Desert. Now this pivot took years. The game was delayed multiple times, and every time a new trailer dropped, the hype just kept building and building. By the time of the launch just a few weeks ago, Crimson Desert had been in development for roughly 6 or 7 years. It had 3 million Steam wishlists. Pre-launch copies sold on Steam were approaching 400,000. In their pre-launch cycles, it was outselling Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 and last year's Game of the Year, Expedition 33. The expectations were through the roof. To really dive into the hype of this game and what everyone was expecting, I wanted to talk about the trailers and what they actually showed us, because it's important for understanding why the launch reaction was so extreme. The trailers for Crimson Desert were jaw-dropping. We saw massive dragon flight sequences. We saw our main character Cliff fighting a boss monster the size of a skyscraper in what appeared to be a Shadow of the Colossus style encounter. We saw him wrestling enemies to the ground with full suplex animations, and we saw floating sky fortresses. It looked like someone had taken everything cool from every action game ever made and thrown it into one game. Almost all of that stuff is actually in the game, It's not a case of fake trailers or misleading marketing. The dragon is there, the bosses are there, and the wrestling moves are there. Now, it's clear that the trailers weren't misleading, and that's not why people were upset, but it's more about the narrative of the game. That's where a lot of the critics drew the line. We all know that the main character's name is Cliff. He's a gruff, scarred mercenary leader. His crew of the Greymanes get ambushed by a rival faction called the Black Bears. A lot of people die, Cliff gets scattered. He vows to get revenge, and he sets out to rebuild his crew and confront the Black Bears' leader, a guy called Marudin, which is a totally fine setup. It's like a classic revenge story. We've seen it 1,000 times before, but it works. But then within the first hour of the game, you get teleported to a floating sky fortress by a random beggar. You're handed a futuristic wingsuit and a sci-fi grappling hook. Beings from another dimension start showing up. The fate of reality is apparently at stake. And Cliff, our guy, our supposedly grounded, grifty mercenary, just rolls with it, apparently. No questions. No, what the fuck is going on? He just adapts immediately and moves on. Really weird, right? To quote the words of game critics at Polygon, they describe the narrative as illogical, contradictory, and poorly written, saying the world building doesn't effectively support the tone the game is going for. Game Informer also says that the plot fluctuates from hard to follow to downright nonsensical, more focused on delivering spectacle than anything resembling coherent storytelling. And to add some depth to this really weird narrative, the characters around Cliff don't really help. Multiple reviewers noted that the supporting cast in Onga, Jan, and Naira feel much less important than the marketing suggested, with one Steam reviewer noting that they felt betrayed that the game was advertised as 3 main characters when in reality it's 1 main character with 2 sidekicks who barely matter. Now look, not every game needs a masterpiece story. God of War's story is good. Red Dead Redemption 2's story is incredible. But Crimson Desert was positioning itself alongside those games, and the story just doesn't hold up to that comparison whatsoever. With all of that being said, let's start talking about the biggest elephant in the room. The thing that single-handedly drove thousands of negative Steam reviews in the first 12 hours. The controls. I don't know how to stress this enough. The control scheme in Crimson Desert is genuinely almost impressively bad. To give you just one example from a Steam reviewer, to change between different tools, like switching from your sword to a mining pick, you have to press F2, move your mouse over the correct slot, and then scroll the mouse wheel until you find the right tool, which also gets resorted automatically, meaning you can't build muscle memory for where those things are. Every single time, F2, mouse over, and then you have to scroll the wheel to find it. To talk to an NPC, in most games you walk up and press one button. In Crimson Desert, you have to press multiple buttons in sequence, and if you approach from the wrong angle, it doesn't work. One Steam reviewer laid it out perfectly. Talking to a vendor requires multiple button presses in a genre where every other game just lets you tap A. Controller players had it arguably worse. There are so many actions mapped to controller buttons that misfires happen constantly, and the sheer number of available moves means the learning curve is brutal for the first several hours. The backlash was so bad and so fast that Pearl Abyss was forced to publicly acknowledge it within the first 48 hours. To their credit, they did follow through. A patch dropped addressing the controls and boss difficulty within the first week. But really think about that. The developer had to patch their own control scheme within days of launch. That's really not a great sign. Oh, and by the way, with all of this happening, something else came to light. Players started noticing that certain in-game assets, specifically some paintings and signs on walls in Game World, appeared to have been generated using AI image tools. Not handcrafted art, but AI-generated placeholders that somehow ended up in the final shipped product. This is a really big deal for a couple reasons. First, Valve's Steam policy actually requires developers to disclose if their game contains AI-generated content. Pearl Abyss had not done this. Second off, the gaming community is extremely sensitive about AI art right now, and for good reason too. It raises questions about whether human artists were replaced in the development process. Pearl Abyss once again issued an apology for this, saying the AI assets were unintentionally included in the final build and that they had used AI only for early stage exploration of tone and atmosphere during pre-production. They added the required Steam disclosure and said they were sorry for the oversight. To say the least, the gaming community was not entirely satisfied with that explanation. The phrase unintentionally included does a lot of heavy lifting when you're talking about textures that shipped in a $70 game. To keep things pushing, we're going to talk about some really wild stuff now. Because the review situation around Crimson Desert became a whole thing within itself. When critics published their reviews, giving it scores around 77 to 81 out of 100, certain segments of the fanbase lost their minds. In their review, the game deserved a 9 or a 10. And any reviewer giving it less was clearly biased, paid off, or just bad at their job. Reviewers were harassed, and websites were disparaged. Then the game actually launched and players got their hands on it, and within 12 hours almost 5,000 negative reviews had hit Steam, pushing it to a 66% mixed rating. The people who had been defending the game from critics were now writing angry reviews themselves. But here's the truly fascinating part. According to Kotaku, about a quarter of the positive reviews they read openly admitted they were written specifically to counter what the reviewer saw as unfair critic scores, with one entire review literally just reading IGN sucks. So a significant chunk of the positive reviews aren't really about the game. Meanwhile, the Korean player base were some of the harshest critics of all. Only 33% of Korean language Steam reviews were positive. The top-rated Korean review was so furious about the controls, it's probably not fully translatable on this channel. You're probably wondering why Korea was so mad about this more than anywhere else, and it's because Korean players have a long memory when it comes to Pearl Abyss. Remember when I talked about that earlier? Well, Black Desert Online's history of bad monetization and poor communication about this very game had already burned a lot of goodwill. By the end of the first weekend though, things did start to shift. As players put more hours in and began to understand the systems, the Steam rating climbed from mixed to mostly positive. Time with the game, it seems, is its own kind of tutorial. To actually put Crimson Desert into context, because it's clearly been inspired by a lot of different games, you can see The Witcher 3 in its dark, gritty open world and mercenary story. You can see Red Dead Redemption 2 in its world detail and slower paced camp mechanics. You can see Breath of the Wild in its exploration philosophy. You can see Dragon's Dogma 2 in its big, physics-heavy monster encounters, and you can see Shadow of the Colossus in some of the big boss fight structure. The problem is that each of these games does its thing extremely well. The Witcher 3 has an incredible story, Red Dead Redemption 2 has unmatched atmosphere and character, Breath of the Wild has the tightest exploration design in gaming history, and Dragon's Dogma 2 fully commits to its chaotic, joyful weirdness. Crimson Desert tries to be all of them at once, and as a result of that, it really doesn't fully match any of them. I know I've been talking about the negative and all of the bad things when it comes to Crimson Desert, but there is one area where it genuinely holds its own and maybe even surpasses the competition. That's the technical achievement of the open world itself. To anyone that's played the game, it is absolutely amazing that there are no loading screens anywhere in the world. The environmental detail is truly extraordinary. The sheer scale of the map, reportedly twice the size of certain 2011 RPG classics, is real and explorable in its entirety. It's like having visual fidelity comparable to Cyberpunk 2077, but in a fully open world with no loading. That's not something to just bat an eye at. That's actually kind of insane from a technical standpoint. To really deep dive into just how insane this world is, let's break down what's actually in the game, because the sheer volume of content is staggering. You've got the main story campaign, base and camp management, where you send your crew on missions to gather resources, full life skills like mining, lodging, fishing, cooking, hunting, and crafting, minigames including arm wrestling, which is genuinely a funny mechanic that they just decided to throw into the game. There are puzzles scattered throughout the world. You can ride a dragon, there's wingsuit gliding, there's mech stations, huge boss encounters, a full equipment and upgrade system, and combat with a moveset so large it includes clotheslines and dropkicks. When you finally get it down, the combat really does click, and a lot of reviewers across the board agree it's legitimately exhilarating. Fighting groups of 20 enemies with a diverse moveset, chaining combos and special moves, it's what Pearl Abyss does best, and it really does show. I have to give them credit for that. But a lot of the surrounding systems feel unfinished or underbaked. Inventory management is still a nightmare, items can't be reordered, picking up resources requires holding a button for each piece, and the inventory fills up fast with no clean way to manage it. I actually read that puzzles were called literal atrocities by one Steam reviewer. It's really funny when you think about it. And the dragon riding that was such a centerpiece of the marketing kind of falls flat on its face. I mean, you can't even access it until chapter 11, and when you do unlock the ability to summon the dragon freely, it only lasts 15 minutes before going on a 50-minute real-world cooldown timer. You have to wait 50 minutes before you can ride the dragon again. Of real time. Like I have to sit here on my couch, put a pizza in the oven, eat the entire pizza, watch an episode of Stranger Things, just to ride the dragon for 15 more minutes. So yes, after all of that, where does Crimson Desert actually land, and who should buy this game? If you loved Black Desert Online's combat, you should probably buy it. The combat is a genuine evolution of that system. And if you already have the patience for complex, deep combo-heavy action, you will feel really at home with this one. If you're a patient RPG player who loves systems, this might be for you, but go in with lowered expectations for the story. The world is enormous and full of things to do, and any player who gives it time consistently reports that the game is finally clicked once they stopped fighting the systems and they really start to learn them. Just give it some time and you can finally settle in. If you want a great story, I highly suggest that you skip it, or at least you wait. The narrative is the game's weakest element, and that's unlikely to be patched. If you're a console player, be careful of this game. PS5 players reported visuals that were being compared to last generation games on the base console. The performance mode does have frame rate instability that reviewers have called inadvisable. It's a better experience on PC, particularly if you have a solid GPU. If you are buying this game specifically for dragon riding, just save your money, or at minimum manage your expectations down significantly. And at $70, that price point is hard to justify for a game with this many rough edges at launch. If you can wait for a sale, and given Pearl Abyss's track record of continuing to update and improve their games post-launch, this will likely be a much smoother experience in 3 to 6 months. That will more than likely be the smarter play. I know I've said it a million times, but Crimson Desert is one of the most fascinating launches we've seen in years. Not because it's a disaster, I mean it's really not, but not because it's a masterpiece either. It's fascinating because you can see the brilliant game hiding underneath all of the chaos. The world is technically extraordinary, the combat at its best is some of the most exciting in the genre, and Pearl Abyss has proven with Black Desert Online that they will keep updating and improving a game for years. Crimson Desert 6 months from now, maybe a year from now, might be a completely different experience. But right now, as of March 2026, at $70, with broken controls, a confusing story, AI art controversy, and PS5 performance issues, it's a game that promises everything and delivers about 70% of it. It's really more like a $40 buy, which, depending on who you are, it might not matter. You know, $70 might exactly be enough, or it might be a hard pass. I really want to know what you guys are thinking about this game in the comments. Are you playing Crimson Desert? What do you think about it? And if you haven't subscribed yet, I would love it if you did. I'll have some more coverage of this game as the patches roll out, and I'll probably do some more updates about every 2 to 3 weeks, maybe 4. For all of you who stayed until the end, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'll catch you in the next one.